Killers of the Flower Moon. I was so in on this movie. I was sold. I was ready to just be all about it. And I got bamboozled. I got swindled. I thought I was above it. I thought I had seen everything. I thought I was beyond every grift. And it turns out that I can still get taken. So I'm getting to the age very quickly where my experience with popular culture and movies is to look at it, be kind of depressed and nostalgic, and say, they don't make them like they used to. That's where I'm at in my life right now. So when I saw this trailer in theaters, I remember getting goose pimples all over my body. You have Scorsese, you have DiCaprio, you have De Niro. 3.5 hour long epic. If this is not going to be a love letter to cinema, if this is not going to be something that was made with care and gentle attention, I don't know what is. Let's pack it up because film is dead. If this isn't going to deliver and take us back to the time when filmmaking was a craft. Now, I get into the movie with my wife, who I made see this thing on a Thursday night when she has to be at work in the morning. And because of the runtime, I know this is going to ruin her night's sleep. She's 7 months pregnant. She has a hard time sleeping anyways, and she has to go work in a hospital. Yes, I know I'm a selfish man, but I wanted to see it on opening night so I could service you, the viewer. Now, both of us ended up leaving 3 minutes before the end of the movie. 3.5 hours invested, and we left 3 minutes early. I want you to conceptualize what it requires to commit to 3.5 hours of runtime, only to leave 3 minutes before the credits run. That's going to be the theme of this. This is already going to be the most overhyped movie of 2023 and probably 2024. So let's start with the premise. It starts with Leonardo DiCaprio, who is in no uncertain terms the protagonist of this movie, which turns out to be kind of a bizarre choice in retrospect. But he plays Ernest, who is coming back from World War I to live with and work for his rich uncle, Robert De Niro, who lives amidst this town filled with the Osage people. These are natives in Oklahoma who struck oil and became very, very wealthy overnight. Now, as is a tale older than time, with athletes, entertainers, the curse of the lottery, when you have people who are not used to wealth, who get a lot of wealth, it is very easy to swindle them. It doesn't usually turn out well. Either they spend too much, they're given to vices, or most commonly, you have critters come out of the woodwork to alleviate your burden, to lighten your pockets, as it were. So the film starts out with this ecosystem, this economy that exists around these people that is entirely white men coming in to exploit them for all of their money, to gouge them on services, to sell them things they don't need, to make themselves present at every turn. And then at the center of it is De Niro, who's like the kingpin of this operation, and it grows and grows and grows. And that ends up leading to insurance fraud. It ends up leading to murder. And it just shows how absolutely dastardly, heartless, and insidious these characters are. And the 3.5 hour long movie is essentially chronicling what is based on a true story of the fleecing of the Osage people by this corrupt town with Robert De Niro's character at the center. Now, Leonardo DiCaprio is in no uncertain terms, he is the protagonist, which is very bizarre because there's nothing about this movie that has character development. If you've spent any time looking into the structure of storytelling, where you have kind of a but therefore structure, like if you're watching a movie and it's, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, that's not a good movie. There's not a lot of tension. However, if it's, well, I went to do this, but this thing happened, therefore I had to do this other thing. That's kind of the flow that creates tension. You're reacting to scenarios and it drives the plot forward. This movie is entirely premise. In the first 20 minutes of buildup, you get the Osage getting their money. You get the ecosystem of villains and vultures surrounding them. You get Leonardo DiCaprio meeting Lily Gladstone, who is fantastic in this, by the way. But you get them meeting, you get their family development, you get the whole setup within about 20 minutes. And I remember at that point, me and my wife talked, we're like, we expected to be bawling. Through the first 20 minutes of the movie, we were so charged. We're like, oh, we're going to be like just sobbing our eyes out by the end of this thing. Fast forward 3 hours later, and we're looking at the exit sign. We're like, how do we sneak out without like disrespecting this sad story, this true historical occurrence, and all of the people that dumped time and energy into making this thing? Like, it was a real conundrum we were in. Like, holy crap, like, we're going to be the guys sneaking out like right before the curtains because we've just had enough. Essentially what happens is the story is just all premise. There's no real story to speak of. It's the setup and then a bunch of things happening. You could almost insert somebody else who takes the dialogue more seriously, who gives attention to the interactions of the characters to build them up more, have more interesting interactions. The interactions are actually boring. That's the thing that got me more than anything is after about an hour, the charm wears off and you're left with these very dry conversations. I couldn't figure out if Robert De Niro was phoning it in his old age or if this was just a script he couldn't really sink his teeth into. I mean, he has an accent, he plays a character that has motives, but this is not peak De Niro by any stretch of the imagination. There are also a bunch of surprise cameos at the end that are insanely wasted. People you didn't expect to see in the movie, but they come in and the role they play and the way those roles are handled are just, they're out of left field, but they also don't add anything to it. I was like, what a wasted role. The long story is all of the things happening to the tribe over many, many, many hours, listening to a lot of setup and dialogue that isn't that interesting. There are a couple of pointed moments within that are really interesting and hard to deal with, but I'm telling you, you're so exhausted by the end that they fall flat. If this movie was an hour and 45 minutes, it might have actually been more of a triumph that could have kept you along, but it tests your patience so much really by smelling its own farts. Because it's one thing to inject those minute-long scenes where you're staring out the fuzzy glass window from inside a ranch house where there's workers fighting against a fire and you just see their blurry silhouettes against a red background and it's like a minute 15 seconds long with the ominous music playing. That serves a purpose in the right context. But when that comes at minute 167, your patience is worn thin a little bit. I also thought it was really peculiar how they handled the characters because they could have done so much with this if they spent more time on the actual Indian tribes and built up the families and had you spend more time with their interactions. Lily Gladstone's superpower in this is she doesn't say much. She's very quiet. And there's a lot of power in her presence because of that. But there's also not a lot of interplay. There's like one scene where she's talking to all of her sisters. It's kind of endearing. But that one scene is not enough to carry the emotional weight 2 hours later when you're trying to deal with the aftermath of everything that's happened. However, there's a ton of time on Leo and De Niro, and it's bizarre because those characters don't fundamentally change. There's nothing that looks like a normal story arc. So at the end of it, it feels like a type of not even a murder mystery, a murder documentary, something you would watch on a Netflix special, some true crime thing that just tells you, oh, this thing happened. These are the series of events that led to it. This is how they got caught. That's the end of it. And the last hour is exactly that. The feds show up because there's murders and it's very Law and Order. So that's it. This is easily one of the biggest letdowns of the year. I'm sure diehard filmmakers and true Scorsese fans are going to find all kinds of things to nerd out over. And there's probably a lot of really satisfying things in there for diehards. It requires a ton of patience. This is molasses level slow, which normally I'm fine with if there's pretty things to look at. We started watching The Third Day, which is a bizarre and kind of fun sort of folk horror show with Jude Law. We started watching it on Prime. Very out there. You have to be very patient with it, but the cinematography was just breathtaking. The colors, the shots. I didn't care about the plot because I was so taken care of visually. I'll suspend my need for a payoff when I'm being treated that way. But when all you have with the cinematography, the direction, and the script is just be patient a little longer, be patient a little longer, stay with us a little longer. That's what the entire movie turns out to for any layperson going to watch it. And actually, I'll throw this in. This isn't a spoiler, but the way it ends, the last 5 minutes, this is actually why we left a few minutes early because they had wrapped everything up. And then they just tested your patience and kind of insulted you with the way that they wrapped everything up. It wasn't showing the characters. It wasn't having that payoff or that conclusion. It was exposition through something that I think they thought was really clever, but looking back on it, it was just more meta bullshit. And it really, really rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know why somebody as established as Scorsese in the modern era where people are tired of meta level nudge, nudge, wink, wink filmmaking would have stooped to the thing that he did, but I felt insulted as a viewer. It was horrible storytelling. Long story short, wasted premise. This movie should have been an 11 out of 10 all day. It had all the pieces. The script did not care about keeping your attention. It did not care about having a payoff. It barely cared about the setup. It dumps a lot of characters at you that are a little tricky to keep track of. Spent way too much on characters that don't evolve. They don't change. There's no character arc. And it spent way too little time on the people that you're actually supposed to care about. So top to bottom, start to finish, if you're going in with high hopes that this is going to be a reliving of like 90s and 2000s, like peak Oscar cinema, this isn't that, but it will probably win Best Picture because of the themes. It's a bunch of really dirty, like obviously villainous white characters, like the worst type of people you imagine, preying on Native Americans in like the most kind of barbaric way. The thing is, that was a setup for amazing storytelling. There was so much there, and they just did none of it. So that's all I got for today. I hope any of this made sense. If any of you have seen the movie, let me know what you think. If you're excited about it, if you're going to see it anyways, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.